Recording in progress. Hello and welcome, everyone. My name is Renee Garrett, and I'm your Speech Therapy PD podcast host for Brainstorms, Functional Neurorehab for SLPs. Before we get started, we have a few items to alert you to. Each episode is 60 minutes and will be offered for zero point 0.1 ASHA CEU. If you're joining us for this live episode and your state license requires live CEUs, be sure to complete all course modules, including the one that says complete course before the end of the day on your Speech Therapy PD account. Here are the disclosures. Valeria Gary is the owner of Thrive Collective Coaching, LLC, and has no relevant non-financial relationships to disclose. I am the founder and owner of BrainBridge Connect LLC, and I receive financial reimbursement from Speech Therapy PD for this and other presentations. I am the host of Brainstorms, Functional Neurorehab for SLPs, a Speech Therapy PD podcast. I am also the Secretary and President-elect of the Communication Disorders Foundation of Virginia. Questions can be written in the chat or the Q&A and will be answered throughout the presentation. And now we welcome our guest, Valeria Gary MA, CCC-SLP, who is a speech language pathologist and owner of Thrive Collective Coaching, LLC, where she coaches healthcare professionals on writing conference proposals and provides copywriting services for small businesses. She's also a certified YNAB coach, helping clinicians apply intentional budgeting strategies for the unique financial demands of a healthcare career. Clinically, Valeria serves patients at Wellstar Kennestone Outpatient Neurorehabilitation Clinic, specializing in the management of Parkinson's disease. She co-facilitates a monthly Parkinson's support group and is the creator of the Speech and Cognitive Wellness class for the Center for Movement Challenges. As a mentor and content creator for the Medical SLP Collective, Valeria develops clinical resources and educational content that supports speech-language pathologists at all stages of their careers. Outside of work, Valeria is a competitive powerlifter with over 10 years of experience, including a world record in her age group. That is amazing. Welcome, Valeria. It's great to see you.
Thanks. I'm glad to be here. Yes. And
Powerlifter.
yes,
Sounds so, yeah.
it's fun. I'm always trying to recruit people to join me, especially women. It's a great sport. It's great balance for all the stress that we go through from a clinical standpoint.
Oh gosh, I can imagine. I was a runner for many years and now I'm not because I'm too old and my joints hurt. So, yeah, I do other things now. One of the questions I typically start with, and I probably should have told you this, but hopefully you'll indulge me. I really love to hear other people's stories, obviously, since I'm a podcaster. But I really like to hear how people came to the field of SLP. Like, what was your journey to get to being an SLP?
Okay, I don't always share this story. It's a little, well, if you know me, the story, it completely fits me. All right. So when I was in high school, we really didn't have a guidance counselor that helped us find careers. We had a career book because this was in the olden days. We had this book, and they would loan you the book for 2 days, and it'd say, find your career, bring it back so the next person can borrow it. At the time, I wanted to be on the news. I wanted to be a broadcaster. So I found out that you had to major in speech communications to be a broadcaster. So when I got the career book and I'm reading about it and it was saying how hard it was and how competitive it was to get a job, I was like, well, I don't want to have to work that hard to find a job. So underneath that was speech pathology. And it was like, oh, there's a great outlook. The job opportunities are great. So I was like, oh, that's what I'm going to do. So I had no idea I needed a master's degree until I actually was in school for speech pathology. It was just a completely random decision I made back in 1984.
That's great. Yeah, I thought I was going to be an orthodontist when I went back to grad school. I thought, oh, I got a couple ways I could go because my dad had a stroke. So I knew about speech pathology because of that. And I thought, oh, orthodontia seems really cool, but you have to go to dental school and then also specialize. And that seems like a really long time. And I was already in my 30s. And so I thought, oh, well, I'll do speech pathology. And now I realize that orthodontia, none of them work on Fridays. So I also
Oh,
don't I also don't work on Fridays usually, so it's fine.
And it worked out. Yeah, I was blessed that my parents, agreed to pay for my undergraduate education. But they said we're only paying for 4 years. So if it takes you longer than 4 years, we're not paying for that. So I had gone. I was like, okay, I got my 4 year, plan. And so I was sitting in class, and the teacher said something about, of course, you have to have a master's degree. And I'm like, what? Like my parents are not going to pay for a master's degree. Like, what am I doing here? So that was kind of my little wake up call. I should probably read into stuff more before I make commitments. But I didn't learn from that. So
Well, I think this is such a great topic because a lot of the talk behind the scenes is about advocating for higher pay for us coming in as, people who have to have master's degrees and many other career opportunities where your entry level is master's degree makes significantly more money as entry level jobs. And so I think this is a really important topic because we're going to talk about how you can learn a little bit more through this framework that you're going to talk about. When we're thinking about things like our significant student loan debt, right? We come out with, unless you're funded, you get, we have pretty significant debt when we come out of
yes,
school. And then we have these ongoing costs like our ASHA dues, our license renewal through our state organization dues if we're a part of that, and then also our CEUs. So, what did you like? Kind of how did you start getting into this realm of becoming a coach for budgeting?
yeah. So it started with my own experience, and I'll kind of talk about that later about like good versus bad with money. But from the standpoint of just like kind of reining things in, like the more clarity that someone has, the better. And so for me, I'm a very analytical person. I'm a fact finder. And so I just kind of started just reading about like, how did other people get out of debt? How did they manage all these expenses? And yeah, I used to think, well, you have to have a lot of money in order to live well and to not have, these debts. And then it really kind of comes down to like the decisions that we make, early on, like, the earlier we can make good financial decisions, the better. So when we're looking at, for example, like, student loans, that's a huge debt for a lot of people. And you hear it like a lot of great success stories where someone paid off like $200,000 of debt in like 2 years or something like that. And those are great stories. I love to read about them. It's just not everybody's reality. And it doesn't necessarily need to be everyone's reality if putting all of your money into one debt means that you live a terrible lifestyle. You're stressed because if anything breaks, you can't do it because you've put all your money in there. So just kind of looking at like, kind of like figuring out what are our priorities, like what are your values, like what are the things that mean the most to you, what do you have, what do you need, is that starting point. You mentioned like dues. Okay, so yeah, if those of us who pay ASHA dues, we know it's coming every year. Like there's not been a
Like
year
Christmas
that that hasn't happened.
coming every year.
Yeah, December 31st or January 31st, depending on how you like to swing that due date. And I see, a lot of people say this is a terrible time of year to have to pay dues because it's right around Christmas. Well, we know in January that that's coming in December. We know Christmas is coming in December. That also tends to be very consistent. So if we start shifting our thinking about making things like a monthly bill instead of this annual surprise that comes up at the most inconvenient time, then we can put ourselves in a better situation. So like, with me, like it's like about $20 a month I set aside for my ASHA dues. I do the same thing in my state license dues. They're only $60 a year. I mean, every other year. And yes, or 65, I think they went up. And yes, I could find $65 every other year, but I just rather just set that aside, set my little couple of dollars aside, and then it's just kind of sitting right there. So that's kind of like, so I just kind of like meandered my way into doing this. I was just trying to figure out stuff for myself. I didn't have the student loan situation because that was so long ago. I paid off my graduate loan many decades ago. But my daughter, was in school, and I wanted to do the same thing for her that my parents did for me to pay for her education. And at the same time, I didn't want to work full time plus all these extra jobs. I've done that, off and on over the years. I wanted to have some kind of like quality of life. And so just as I started kind of solving my own problem, then that's how I started getting, doing the deep dive and then talking to other people about it and then kind of coaching people through that same process.
Yeah, and no, you bring up some really good points because I think, I remember my mother-in-law did this, and I think my mom did this too when I was a kid. They did this thing through their bank that was like the holiday. club or something like that where they set aside so many dollars per month for their
Mm-hmm.
holiday budget for buying gifts. And so it's a sort of a similar principle as we know, like, I know my kid's birthday is coming, or I know um, Christmas is coming, or whatever this annual event, whatever thing you're going to participate in. So I'm in Virginia, and our state association dues, but our state license dues are also due every year. So it used to be that our state license, our state association, ASHA, and I had another certification were all due in December. So it was brutal.
Mm-hmm.
And now the state license is due in June. So that's helpful because they moved it out of that holiday period. But you still, again, you've run into people who are like, oh my gosh, I have to pay this thing. But you knew it was coming all year. And I've worked with people before who um, didn't renew their license for the state and then they can't work
Oh,
because
yeah.
they forgot. And it's like, did you? You don't forget, it's coming.
Right,
And
especially
that's the
something that impacts your income, because now you're really not going to be able to pay things if you can't work. Yeah.
Well, yeah, and the state license is the smallest one, do, in output wise. It's for us it's I think 85 now. It used to be 80. It's 85, but it's every year. It's coming. So
Mm-hmm.
again, I think that's a really good strategy is to think about it as we know this is going to happen, so you need to be planning for that versus surprise.
Yes, there are surprises in life, but those aren't one of them. Just like if you own a car repair is not really a surprise. You know at some point your car is going to need some work. If you have a pet, at some point you're going to have a vet bill. If you have a
Hmm.
child, at some point you're going to have all the things that come along with that. And so when we think about these things that are going to likely come up and we plan for it, then when it happens, it's like it's an inconvenience, but it's not this big emergency. So an emergency is something that you could never have predicted. And there are true emergencies in life that sometimes can totally derail us. But the things that we can predict, it's like if we could turn that from an emergency to just an inconvenience from a mental health standpoint, it's so much easier when something happens because it's like okay, I know what's coming. I've handled that. I've got that planned. I've got something set aside. It might not be enough to pay like the whole thing, but just having even just part of something, like I've got part of that. So if I have to borrow money, I'm not having to put the whole thing on my credit card, for example. So it's just very freeing to have a lot of clarity. Again, you don't have to have a lot of money. Just that the clarity and some peace of mind and some breathing room makes a huge difference.
Yeah, and so when that we you use the or I see the word or the acronym YNAB. First,
Yes.
what does that stand for? And then also, can you talk to us about how that method sort of helps organize your expenses?
Yeah, so YNAB stands for You Need a Budget, and we call it YNAB for short. It is a method that is basically it's a spreadsheet, but they've turned into an app and there's a website, but it's based on a spreadsheet, and it's basically a digital version of the old envelope system. So
Mm-hmm.
with YNAB, kind of like the first thing that you learn is that you need to give every dollar a job. So not talking about your retirement, like investment funds, but like the money in your checking account, your savings account, under your mattress, in your purse, like all that money. You say how much do you have, and then each one gets a job based on what the priorities are. So you ask yourself, okay, like what is this money that I have right now need to do until more money comes in? We're not forecasting, well, I'm going to get paid in 2 weeks, so I'm going to pay XYZ. It's like, okay, in the here and now, how much money do you have and how far is it going to get you? And that is a really clarifying question to ask because, again, a lot of times we're forecasting, we know, well, next month we're going to get paid again and we're going to pay these other bills. But we have to sit with ourselves and say, right now, I don't have the money to pay my rent that's coming up in 2 weeks. I'm expecting more money to come in, but I don't have it right now. And when we face those kind of realities, is that, it's kind of that wake up call. So that's the kind of the main premise. So using like the software or the app, basically what you do is you have categories. And so like I have a category that's like my monthly expenses that are set. So like, that's going to be like your rent or mortgage, student loan payments, things like that. Then we'll have like a variable category. So that's going to be things like groceries, gas, things that happen every month, but the amount might not always be the same. And of course, everyone sets their budgets up differently. I have a fitness category because I like to join a lot of gyms, and I like to do things related to that. And that's like one of my hobbies. So I always want to make sure I have money set aside for that. I've got an SLP category, so that's going to be my ASHA dues, my licensure, my state association, and then I call it SLPs, like doing great things, and that's going to be like going to like fun events that someone's hosting. And so every time, every pay period when I get paid, I say, okay, I've got this money that's come in. What does it need to do until I get paid again? And so I'll say, okay, well, I know I've got to pay this bill. So I'll assign like for the electric bill. Okay. And again, it's almost like putting in money into an envelope. And so once that money is out, I can't put any more money in the envelopes. So let's say if I decide, okay, I've got $200 that I'm going to spend on groceries until I get paid again. When I go to the grocery store, and this is part of the method, is before you spend something, you look and see, have you set aside the money for that? So if I have 200 set aside for the grocery store, I'm going to check before I go into the store, before I go into Costco, so that I know, unless I'm going to move some other money around, I can't spend $300 in Costco and still, have this balanced budget that's going to meet the needs for myself. There's flexibility. I can always move things around and say, well, I'll spend less money maybe on dining out in my fun category and spend it in Costco. So budget is not something that is rigid or strict, but being able to say, I have this money in hand. This is what it needs to do until more money comes in, and doing that for every single dollar. Like you don't want to just have this kind of random like thought of like, well, I've got $10,000 in the bank, so I know I can buy whatever I want. Because if you don't know what that $10,000 needs to do, you might be saying, oh, I can go on this vacation for $2,000, and I can buy this new electronic for $4,000, and I can go to Costco and spend $1,000, and next thing you know, you don't have money for something you want to have money for. You can't pay your ASHA dues because it seemed like you had a lot of money, but you didn't know exactly what it's supposed to do. And so,
I think that's brilliant because a lot of people don't. We're not. And I said this to someone the other day. We're not taught that in like our grad programs, and PTs tend to have a business course where they're learning about basic business principles and some basic finance. Where we're not. That's not part of our curriculum in grad school, and so I think it's really helpful because unless you are seeking that knowledge or you were taught that from someone else, it's not something you come into the profession knowing. And I know that we talk about low pay, but honestly, some entry level jobs, if you're coming out of grad school, I know for me, what I made my first year was more money than I'd ever made at my old job.
mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I had student loan debt, but I also wasn't prepared that what my paycheck would look like or my monthly income would look like. And I was like, oh wow, okay.
Yes, the whole lifestyle creep can happen sometimes. Um,
Right.
it's like, obviously everybody has a different, circumstance. So there's no one, when it comes to money and budgeting, there's no one rule because one person might have $60,000 income and they're living well on it, and someone else could be struggling just depending on circumstances where you live. If you live in California and you've got several kids, you're a single parent, you've got these loans, that's totally different than someone making 60,000 who lives, in a rural part of Georgia who doesn't have any dependents. So there's a lot of variables. But when you look at, like, for example, Informed SLP has a really good survey, a salary survey, it's great, broken down. ASHA has the same thing. And so when you look at the salaries we make on paper, a lot of us look pretty good. You're seeing like 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, $150,000 salaries. But yet also when you look online, you see a lot of people saying, I'm not making enough, I can barely make ends meet. And so just try to find like where's that disconnect between the salaries that, sure, there are people making a whole lot more than us that don't even have a master's degree, but also there are people that work really, really hard that make far less than what we make too.
True.
So we kind of find ourselves in the middle. And so some of it, again, is circumstance. Some of it is the financial literacy if we weren't taught how to spend money, what to do with money. There's lifestyle creep that can happen. So, sometimes I kind of blame the colleges for some of this because, when I was in college, my dorm, we didn't have air conditioning. And there was no private bathrooms. The bathroom was down the hallway. You had to go down there to shower. There was nothing between the showers. It was just this long thing there's a wall behind you, but like the person next to you, they could just have a conversation and share soap because there's just like that was the conditions in the olden days. But now colleges have they've upped what they provide, and of course with that the cost has gone up. So now you've got the 24-hour dining, you've got all these nice study areas, and so you're spending all this money because you're getting all these things. So when you leave, you don't want to go to just like a rundown apartment. You're used to living a lot nicer. You get your first job, you got some money, you can afford the nicer apartments, and that it kind of just starts from there. Because we never want to go back. Like if we've had some luxury, it's hard to go back to a plainer lifestyle. So I think sometimes it just starts right from there. So
That's so funny you say that because I saw a friend of mine today posted something about her daughter's going to be moving into college in the fall. And so she was choosing her room and looking at the suite she got, and it had a fireplace. And I was like, where is that? What? Listen, I lived with my parents when I went to college. I was lucky to do that and commute. And then, my graduate experience, I was already like on my own and had kids and stuff. So there was no luxury
right,
fireplace. It's interesting to see the interpretation now versus when you went to school and when I went to school. It's not that it doesn't seem like it's that far apart that long ago in terms of years, but yet the way that the expectations place is like, and I say this about my kids because they don't listen to my podcast and they probably wouldn't care either way, but like how my kids think they should live or should have is what my husband and I have worked for 30 plus years to build.
right.
And they think that that's where they should start. And I saw that too with, some of my friends who got master's degrees right out of school, like didn't have a pause between their bachelor's and their master's like I did. And they thought in their mid 20s they should live like their parents who had worked for 40 years to build something
Mm-hmm.
should or are living, they felt like they were entitled to that just because they had the education. And so I think that's another piece that um, is really interesting just to see that transition from generation to generation on how I grew up not really having means and having to work for everything. And then now just like how our kids are, or at least my kids.
Well, no, I think that's pretty. Yeah, it's very common because we want to give our kids, more than what we had.
Yes.
And I grew up like it was a very solidly middle class family. So we never like. I'm sure it was hard for my parents to pay for my college tuition, even though like if you would laugh at the tuition, now like what it costs. But for them, that amount coming out of their, the household per month was a struggle. But it was never a time like when we were worried about losing our house or not
Mhm.
knowing where the next meal would come from. So it's like, yeah, we drove cars until the cars completely fell apart. That was kind of our level. But when we try to do more for our kids, I think that sets that stage. So that again, if they're used to living in a certain type of house, like to go to an apartment without air conditioning or where there's like no elevator, and you're on the fourth or fifth floor, like it's hard to conceive of doing that. And of course, social media doesn't help because we see people our age, young people see people their age with these, gorgeous homes and these nice cars and a certain lifestyle. And so it seems like that's the norm. That's how you should be living. And if you're not living like that, it's like, wow, I have a master's degree and this person is only, selling, I don't know, eggs, chicken eggs, fresh eggs, and they've got this better lifestyle. It's hard to match that up.
Yeah, there's a little graphic on social media that goes around sometimes. And it's like the budget for one of the house hunters or whatever. And it's like, my husband is a uh, meme designer and I'm a stay-home mom. And our budget is $1 million for a
Right.
vacation home or whatever. So,
Yeah.
yeah, I think the social media definitely plays into that. Um, but even, you mentioned this earlier, and I know I did this as well, but a lot of us work PRN at
Hmm.
some point, either by choice or because you just need that extra income. But, when we're thinking about budgeting, if we know that our paycheck isn't going to be consistent or the same every month, what advice would you give to someone who's just really starting out and maybe needs to add that PRN income?
Yeah, so that's actually there's two different scenarios. So one is the person who's doing PRN and that's their main thing, and their income is all over the place, versus someone who maybe has like a full time or part time job and they're adding the PRN on top of that. So to the person whose income like they're just doing PRN, or maybe that's the main thing they do, and their regular income is the lowest amount. When you have that variability, that's when you really need to be crystal clear. So what do you need each month? Like you need to be able to say, this is the amount I need. And so we're talking about your big obligations like housing, car payments, car insurance, things like that. But also be realistic. So like if let's say if you normally eat out 3 or 4 times a week and you know that that's, maybe excessive for you, don't say you'll never eat out again, because chances are at some point you're going to want to eat out again. So just think like even if you cut it down to once a week, like what does it cost to be you? What does your month look like? Then that's how much you're going to need to make at the very least. Then like once do PRN for a while, you kind of get a feel of like how like what's a typical month. So some months, let's say you only make $2,000 one month, and another month is $6,000. So you if you notice there's like this $4,000 a month variability, that's going to be kind of your variable income. Quotient is probably not the best word because I'm not a math person, so I don't even know if quotient is the right word for that. But in your budgeting, you know that about $3,000 or $4,000, you're going to want to have that set aside so that on that $2,000 a month, let's say if it costs $5, say $4,000 for your normal monthly expenses. If you have a $2,000 a month, you're going to want to have that other $2,000 sitting somewhere so that you can pay your basic things. And if you have a $6,000 a month, you don't want to spend $6,000 a month. You know that if you normally spend $4,000, at least at first, add that extra $2,000 to your variable income fund so that you have that the next time you have a low month. And I hope I explained that clearly. But basically, a lot of times like, your income can be up and down, so it could be like this rocky boat that goes up and down. And expenses can look like that rocky boat that goes up and down. But the more you can level things out, the better. So setting aside some so that you always have $4,000 that you can use towards paying your income is what someone with if their income is very variable. Now, if someone is adding PRN income, then we really want to prevent the lifestyle creep from in that situation. So that takes us to the concept of getting a month ahead. So with YNAB, one of the goals is to be so good with your money that you are a month ahead, meaning that if I get paid today, that money, I don't need to use that for next week's bills because I've already covered those. The money I make today, I'm going to be funding the categories for next month so that come, say, April 1st, I have everything I need to pay everything for that whole month. And then when I get paid in April, now I'm putting that money towards the May bills. When you're a month ahead, that is very freeing. It buys you a lot of room. There's flexibility if an emergency comes up and you need to take from that. At least you know that you can pay the things that you need to pay. So the person who is adding that peer income, I would say get a month ahead first. Unless you had to do it like if you're like in some major debt and you got to pay some things off, but try to like get a little bit of ahead and then prioritize. Am I going to use this for for debts? Do I need to use it towards a loan? Am I saving up to buy a house for vacation? Make those decisions from there. But when you first start getting the extra money, make sure you're 1 month ahead because that'll keep you from adding debt to whatever debt that you have.
Yeah, and I know when I started doing PRN, I was still full time, and it was actually really hard because I was doing PRN after work and then adding a weekend, but there was reasons for that. I had student loan debt. I had two teenagers, so we were thinking about not only their expenses for sports and dance and swimming and piano and all the things that they were doing, but I was thinking about their college too. And so someone did put a comment in. It says the millennial group are the first group who will not be able to match or exceed their parents' standard of living. Even if they lived a modest lifestyle, they will not be able to accomplish what we, and this person said I'm 62, took for granted, as in house and children. So yeah, that's a great comment.
Yeah, and I think there are a lot of different dynamics. So it's definitely a different pathway. I think they will do far greater things. It just looks different, and it's not necessarily as easy. Like for us, it
Hmm.
was things were a lot easier just because we kind of sailed through things a little bit easier because just the economy was different, expectations were different. But I mean, they were making a lot more than we than us for sure. So
Oh yeah, I remember being in college the first time and scraping the floorboards underneath my car mats to see if I had money for gas because I was paying for my own college.
uh-huh.
But, to your point earlier, I know that the most expensive semester I had, and again, I lived at home, I commuted. My tuition, I think the last semester I was there was roughly $1,300 and that was just tuition. And so it's markedly different because even my son graduated from college in 2018, and that wouldn't have covered one class for him.
Right.
And he
Mm-hmm.
went to a public university. It wasn't a private, it was a public university. So yeah. Um,
Yeah, and
and then the
also
same.
they have the younger generation. I guess we still have opportunities. We're still alive. We have opportunities, but they have opportunities now that like we couldn't even have conceived of. Like I thought, if you had a speech pathology degree, all you could do was speech pathology. I had no idea all the different things that we could do. That's not even involving
Mhm.
like clinical practice. So there's some great opportunities, and they're finding a way to like just create these these opportunities out these careers out of something that it's like, wow, did you just make that up? And like, I did, and it's sold, and that's how I'm
Yeah, all
living.
these
So
streams of income, and the people are talking about it all the time, all the time.
yes.
And so the same person said, my house in LA has increased tenfold. I bought in 1996. My children are feeling quite bitter as they both have degrees, good jobs, and feel like they are treadmilling.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and my daughter says the same thing because she actually bought her house 10 years ago, and if and they've really outgrown their house. And if they were to sell their home to try to get into something bigger that gives them a little bit more space, now they'd pay this same amount for what they're selling it for, and it would be the same house. So
Mm-hmm.
yeah, things have drastically changed. When you're looking at, I know for me, I put gas in my car, and my car takes the premium gas. And when I paid for gas the other day, I was like, huh, come again, what?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Because it shouldn't be that much. But yeah, it was $4.47 a gallon with my 10-cent off grocery store points.
Mm-hmm.
So I was like, what has happened?
Yeah, which is like
So
where I
that
live
was,
now. Like I couldn't I couldn't afford my house if I was buying it right now. Like there's especially for the site. I mean, like when I bought my house, I was single, so I bought it based on a single person's income. So it's a 1,200 square foot townhouse. But now I'll be like, there's no way I'm paying that for a 1,200 square foot townhouse. But that's what the costs are. So I'm glad I did it back then because I certainly couldn't just up and do it now for sure. And of
yeah, no,
course,
we built our house 14 years ago. And so now what we're seeing, people that move into where we live, we're like, you pay what? What?
yeah, yeah.
And
But
then when
then
we
real
sold our
estate
old
does that
house,
though. Okay.
we sold our old house, we paid off my student loan because the
Mm-hmm.
interest rate was, back then it was, I think, 6.5% for my student loan. And it was like, we got to get rid of this because this is too
Mm-hmm.
much,
Mm-hmm.
especially having two kids that we knew were going into college. Um, yeah, it was kind of a no-brainer, but it was a little painful because our old house didn't sell immediately. We were two mortgages for a year. So that was a challenge, and that's part of the reason I
Right.
did a full-time job plus PRN. But I think, when we're looking at budgeting, one of the things that kind of came up was, and I love this, what does it mean to budget for future you? Because I
Mm-hmm.
really love that question.
Yeah. So a lot of times we think about budgeting for like retirement, like we think about like saving and putting money away from that. But we still have to live between now and retirement. We still want to have some joy out of life. And so budgeting for the future you, it could be you next week, it might be you next month, you at the end of the year. So thinking a bit again, when I was saying kind of like that roller coaster, like that ship where there's like up and down a lot of times as far as what our bills are. That's what often causes stress when some months, we're okay and we have like maybe our bills are $3,000 for the month, and then the next month something happens, and now we got to pay out 5,000, and then we go back to 3,000. Then Christmas comes, that up and down. So budgeting for the future you means thinking about what are your actual expenses that come around, maybe not every month, those non-monthly expenses. So again, that's going to be like your Asher dues, Christmas shopping, birthday gifts, vacation. If you pay your car insurance, twice a year, or like your escrow accounts, all those things that aren't monthly. If we treat those like a monthly bill, it takes a lot of the bite out and it levels out our month. Instead of it being up and down, now maybe our normal bills are 4,000, and now we've got $1,000 worth of these non-monthly expenses that we set aside each month. So now our months are 5,000 I need to put into my budget. I get money in, the 5,000 instead of a 4,000, a 6,000, a 3,000, a $8,000 as far as like what you are setting money aside for. So I always like to, like, when I do something that was not in my best interest, I like to kind of just sit in that moment for a bit, whether it's, food, if I've overeaten and I was like, okay, I shouldn't have done that. How do I feel right now? Like, I don't feel great. I don't want to feel like this again. Same thing with the budget. So if it's like it comes like Christmas time and you really wanted to get something for your kids, but you're trying not to add more credit card debt, kind of sit in that feeling and think, like, how does it feel not to have planned for this? Like, is there anything I could have done differently? Now, again, in some situations, someone doesn't have a choice. Like, they are living dollar to dollar. Like, there's nothing to set aside. But for those of us who are in that, more of those higher brackets where it's like, I make good money, but where's, like, what's happening? Why don't I feel like it? Like, we're the ones that really need to kind of like, sit with what decisions can I make today so that next year I don't have this same situation coming up.
Well, and you did a really nice thing on your social media where um, you were talking about self-funding conferences and how you plan for that. And I think that, I hear that a lot from conference attendees and people that I know who are, a wide variety of ages. It's not just older, younger, in the middle. It's kind of everyone is saying these conferences, when you're self-funding, are so expensive, and most employers now don't really provide that education stipend anymore. They don't pay for things like continuing ed. They definitely don't pay for travel for conferences. And so how you broke that down, I thought was really beautiful online because it was such a good example of, like you've said a couple times tonight, it's coming. So how do you
Mm-hmm.
plan for it? So can you kind of walk us through your ASHA breakdown, for example, of how you planned out in your own budget to like account for, it's coming. So how do I do this?
Yes. And so what I look at, I figure out, okay, what are all the expenses? And I have my little secret weapon that helps me. I know everyone can't do it, but I look at, okay, how much is the registration? How much is the hotel? How much will it cost to get there? How much will I need to spend in Ubers getting from my place to my airport, from the airport to the hotel? And if I, go to any things in between, I usually try to just do everything within just Asha and not have to Uber once I get there. But then you got to Uber back to the hotel and all that. Food, like how much, what might I need? And so I take that big number and divide it by 12. And so every month, again, in my budget, I'm setting aside that particular money. Now, there are ways to save money on conventions. One, which is if you can be an exhibitor, if there's a company that needs someone at their booth, that is the most fantastic way to save money because, for example, I work the Medical SLP Collective booth, so that covers my registration and my hotel. So that's a huge relief. So I could take that money and put it towards another convention. But on the years that I don't do that, I've got to factor in those costs. If you go to a big one, for example, like Asher, there's always lots of events in the evenings, and those events have hors d'oeuvres. I can make a meal out of hors d'oeuvres. Like I don't need a sit down dinner. It's like I could, so that's my meal. I don't need to spend money on that. When I arrive at the hotel, I do Instacart to get like protein shakes for my breakfast. I'll get like bottles of water, so I don't spend $5 for one bottle of water. I'll get like a little case of water, my snacks. I don't buy lunch at the exhibit hall in the convention center. I have my things from my Instacart. I mean, my free things for dinner. I've got my breakfast. So unless I'm, going out with a group of people, then I don't have to pay for those, dinner expenses. Now, not every convention provides as much food as you might get at something like ASHA. So if it's a state one, a lot of times lunch might be provided, and then dinner. Again, I'm going to figure how much money do I need to go out to dinner, and I usually budget pretty generously because when I go out, I like to, if someone says, let's go to this place and it's expensive, I want to be able to go. I don't want to say, well, I can't go. I can't network with these people because I don't have the money for that restaurant. So I try to have that set aside. Volunteering, I don't know how much that helps. I know a lot of places you still have to register even if you volunteer. But I think maybe for students, though, that might be an opportunity to be able to get like a reduced rate for conventions to volunteer. Being, if you submit a proposal and it's accepted, people always ask, like, how much do you get paid for that? Like zero. You get $0. And you have to register. And most of the time you don't get a discount. So when you're on that stage doing doing your presentation, it's for the thrill of the experience. It's not. It's for potential future money. So you might meet people that want to pay you to do something. But unless you're invited to a conference, then you're paying for your registration. I will say I love that Georgia's convention. Like if you're presenting, you get a discount. And I'm like, thank you so much for at least giving me some dollars off for being a presenter. But I know, like when I spoke at Flasha, I mean, I had to pay the full price for that, and Ash, you had to pay the full price unless you're invited, and then they'll pay for your registration. And if you're a big wig, they might pay for more than just the registration, but typically you get your registration waived. Yeah, but that's how I do, like whether it's a big thing like ASHA or in Basel, or if it's a state convention, or something small like a grassroots thing. Like I used to always go to 8% Summit when they were having that. That was an annual event, a small networking thing. I still budgeted, so I could eat and have fun and shop if it's because it was always in Charlotte, so I like Charlotte. But just breaking those things down is how I did it. And I will say, like like I work part time and I have side gigs. So I make a decent amount, but I'm not making the big bucks. And I'm married for love, so we're a household like we're not a 200,000 and up household here. So speaking from the kind of like some of our average expenses, because I always want to make sure people know that I'm not living off my husband's money, and then that's why I can afford to do these things. It's like I have a part-time job and I have a few side gigs, and those side gig money I try not to I try to use that wisely, and so you use that towards my pursuits like fitness and my speech pathology things, and building my business, as opposed to like getting a new car or renovating the house. Although it could certainly use renovations, but my priorities right now are just being able to hop up and go to a conference when I want to, and hang out. So we all have our
Yeah.
priorities.
Yeah. No, and that's the same. I do side things now for that same reason so that I can also build my savings and not have to, like, for example, when I was teaching adjunct, I just put my money straight into a 401k that was offered by the university, and I got $35 a paycheck. So but for me, the point I'm at right now, that works for me because I don't have kids at home. I'm not paying for college tuition. I don't have student loan debt. I paid off my car early, so it's a little bit different position, but it's doable. But you do have to be mindful, and you do have to plan for that, and you do have to, I don't think I'm that great at like the budgeting stuff you're talking about. I'm like, oh, I should probably do that. I should be better at that because I think when you start looking at, and this was something I learned when I started the LLC and I met with my accountant for the first time. Um, Looking at every single dollar that goes out, you're kind of like, oh, did I really spend that much money going out to eat last month? Wow, we had two big birthdays. And so, um, yeah, it's a really eye-opening experience. And you mentioned the envelope method, and I don't know that everyone's familiar with that, but it's like you have cash, and correct me if I'm not saying this correctly, but um, you have cash in envelopes that's allotted for going out to eat or leisure or whatever the case may be. Is that what you're referring to when you say
Yes.
the envelope?
So the current term for that is cash stuffing. That's what they call it, cash stuffing.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's like, but like you take your paycheck, you have it in cash, and then you have an envelope that says rent. You have an envelope that says groceries, an envelope that says leisure or whatever, and then you put the money in there. And then once you run out of money, you're out. Like you can't spend money that
Yeah.
doesn't exist. And the goal is, even though now we do a lot of things digitally, and I'm not against credit cards at all. I love getting my rewards points, which is also how I fund a lot of my lifestyle, is between like getting cash back on certain cards that have high cash back things, or points that I can redeem for gift cards. I love that. But the thing is, like, before you buy something, like, do I actually have money set aside for this particular reason? And if not, where can I get it from? So there have been times where it's like, so I have two fun categories. One is just called fun, and that's dining out. It's like, it's food and booze, right? So if I those two things. And I have another category I call impulse. And so the impulse, like every paycheck, I'll put like $50 in there. So that way, one day if I just want to buy something I see interesting, I could just, if I have the money, I could just buy it. I don't have to be like, oh, do I need to save up for it? Should I get it? Should I not? It's on sale. How long is it going to be on sale? So I just have that, that category. Um, and it's freeing because, again, I don't feel restricted. Even though I'm living by this budget, I know that I still have room to go out to eat. And if I don't spend the money on going out to eat, then I'll put that in my vacation funds. Like at the end of the month, if I didn't spend it when I was on vacation, now I can go out to eat when I'm on vacation and have that particular money. So just having that flexibility. And I will say, we're talking about as far as when kids were younger. I didn't use this particular method when my daughter was growing up, but I homeschooled her from up until high school. Now I still had to work. We could not live off of my husband's income, so I was doing PRN work, and I just kind of made it work. It's like when you have kind of a goal, you make things work. But of course, during that time, I couldn't really save for retirement because like everything I made had to go into the household to pay a bill or to pay for her activities. I wanted her to not just be stuck at home homeschooling. I wanted her to be a part of different clubs and organizations. And so I had to be at peace with the fact that I am prolonging my time working because I can't do this homeschooling and PRN, pay bills, and save for retirement. So I think that's another thing we have to think about is like, just we make decisions. Sometimes we don't like the decisions that we have to make, but just we make it if we can just be at peace with the decisions, the choices that we're making. There were times I would go to some of her friends' house, and I'd be kind of jealous because they'd have like these nice playrooms and they had the backyard with all the equipment. I'm like, oh gosh, I wish I had that for my child. And it's like, well, I could if I stopped homeschooling and worked somewhere full time and maybe picked up some PRN. We could move into these nice houses that have all these things. Or I said my choice actually was I decided I wanted to homeschool, and I loved homeschooling, so I had to be at peace with we're not going to have that house that I love, even though I'm jealous every time I come here and I can picture exactly where I'd pull all my stuff. But just knowing that was my decision. Or if we decide like we want our kids to be inexpensive, like activities like travel soccer, that might mean that we don't have money for other things. We might not be able to get ahead on something. But if that's what we want for our child, be at peace with I've chosen to put this money here and not pay off debt or not put it towards savings. Like, I don't think we should, all have to, all be like debt free and have this big savings if that's not what's the priority for us, in that moment.
Well, in full disclosure, and this is a very true story, and it's something my husband and I will often like, we semi joke about it, but it's more of like watching um, people who really do have the hustle and people who don't. And it's not a criticism, but it's like for me when we were stationed overseas and then we moved back home and my husband was still active duty military. My dad got sick, but my priority was I wanted my kids to have a really solid foundational education at the elementary level. I was not an SLP. I was working for Tupperware. I sold Tupperware to pay for my kids to go to private school because it was important for me because our schools the city that we lived in were not good schools, but we loved our home, we loved our neighbors, we loved where we were, and it was worth it for me to do that, to pay for them to have a good solid foundation in reading and all those academic skills that they needed that we knew were going to help them as they got older. And so I did whatever I had to do. And I don't think I've ever shared that in
Mm,
this space before, but we kind of joke about it now because we're like, yeah, I was 25 and we were moving back here from living in another country, and I didn't have any job prospects. I wasn't, whatever my degree was in was not going to be something that was lucrative. I was going to be making bare minimum. And I did that to foster that. So there's ways that you can do it that, you talk about different income streams.
right.
Um, but we did have a couple of comments that, so someone said, though we here are in the same field, each of us has our own unique mix of strengths, skills, and people who benefit from those. Have you or anyone here suggestions for sources that can effectively support us in isolating those deeply positive aspects of what we have to offer and to apply them within fields perhaps only related to ours? Just
I'm
really,
very visual. I'm sorry, I'm gonna have to look at that.
yeah, that's a very vocab wise, that's a lot to decode. No, and that's not offensive. I'm not saying that in an offensive way. It's just a lot to decode.
So I guess as
And we're
far
on the
as like,
East Coast.
so as far as like ways that we can use our skills in order to like for income is how I'm interpreting this. Yeah, so
Same.
there's yeah. So think about if you do cognitive rehab with adults, there's something called goal, plan, do, review that we're probably all familiar with. Well, that applies to so many things. So like even like any kind of coaching type things is all like goal, plan, do, review. Some people might specialize with people like with learning disabilities, ADHD, whether children or adults. I've seen SLPs focus on reading if that's like one of their areas. I do some wellness things. I've kind of ventured into the wellness realm, which is a lot of fun because you don't have to worry about insurance or paperwork. You just have to make sure you're not doing skilled therapy, but just take like I enjoy working with people with Parkinson's. I enjoy creating things, and so I created this speech and cognitive wellness class for people with Parkinson's. I know people SLPs who like to sing, and they've like started like Parkinson's choirs, for example. So there's like those are saying there's a lot we can do that I had no idea in the past, that something that was possible for us. So let us know, Alan, if that answers your question. If not, I'll be glad to um, to answer that. And yes, being homeschooled, it was definitely a blessing. It worked so well with our family. At one point, my husband was working nights, and so I would get up in the morning, I would homeschool, and then there's like a kinder care type place down the street that had the after school things for kindergartners who went to school half a day. So I would homeschool her, then I would take her to the after school program, then I would work the hospital during that time. Or my husband would drop her off, and I would pick her up. So we kind of tag team that way. Uh, we did a lot of creative things to make it work, but yeah, PRN was perfect. And then in the summertime, sometimes she would spend like a month with my parents, and so then I would just work like full time, as many hours as I could do in that month while she was with her parents, and I would not spend it all. Then I would make it so we could spread out over a few more months. But yeah,
Yeah, and
it
that's one
was
of the
great.
reasons I did different PRN jobs was because that's when I first started doing adjunct faculty work. And that was the only way I could make the adjunct faculty work was to do PRN because I could fit that around my schedule for
Mm-hmm.
academia and make it all balanced. And I did two PRN jobs. No, I had at one point I had three PRN jobs
Wow.
because I was working at the inpatient rehab hospital I started at. Then I was working in acute care, and then I did a little side gig at assisted living that was only like 2 days a week or two half days a week. And it just, for me at the time, it worked. I will say at this point, unless I was really put in a bind, I wouldn't do it again because the scheduling aspect of that was really hard. And location wise, we're talking about a 40 mile radius that I was traveling. And so at that point, in the early 2010s, it was easier because, from a standpoint of like gas prices, for example, it wasn't super expensive. It wasn't super taxing for me to pay for gas. Now there's no way because I'd pay for gas. Like my
Right.
daughter, she went, was working. to put my grandson in daycare, she would have to pay if he went to daycare, she wasn't able to work from home, her whole paycheck would go to pay for daycare. So it's very interesting to see just how things have changed. Um,
Yeah, absolutely. And oh, goodness knows, daycare prices. It's unbelievable, unbelievable.
yeah, that's insane.
Yeah,
Yeah, and I want to get to the other question. So one person did ask about your Parkinson's course, but I'll let you if you want to put that in the chat or anything. But this,
sure.
I
Yeah,
think this is a really crucial question and a really interesting one because you mentioned this earlier, but when you're thinking about credit card debt, paying off your credit card every month and then having some savings feels like a win. But then if you have a zero balance each month, how does that actually mask the fact that you weren't building anything long term? I think that's a really, really great and important question.
yeah. So I used to think I was so good with money because I was doing my putting my 10% aside for my retirement. And I would put everything on my credit card because, again, I'm all about the points, credit card churning and all that kind of stuff. Everything on the credit card, and I would get paid on every other Thursday. When I would get paid, I could pay off my credit card in its entirety. And to me, that was good with money because I've got my retirement savings, and I don't have credit card debt. What I came to realize once I started using YNAB is that I was living very much paycheck to paycheck. Even though I didn't feel like it because I felt like, like I'm okay. But the fact that I had to wait till I got paid to pay for the stuff I've already bought meant that I was not as good with money as I thought. And so when we're in that, like when the money comes in and that decision's already been made for us, so yeah, we might be like zero balance because we've assigned the dollars a job, and that's like to pay the stuff I bought last month. But we're not getting ahead because if something unexpected comes up, we don't have that money sitting there waiting for us. We've got to wait till the next check comes in, and now we've put something on the credit card, and then maybe we can't pay all of it, this particular month, and so that's how that cycle continues. So getting to the point where when the money comes in, you're actually making a decision, what am I going to do with this moving forward? Not how am I paying for something I've already done? That's what propels you forward because then as you start, like you pay for everything for this month, or you at least budget everything for this month, and then you start setting aside things for next month. Now, if something comes up, you're not living paycheck to paycheck. If you don't get paid for some reason, you're okay, at least for this month, because you've got that money for sure. There's no doubt in your mind that you can pay everything you need, including your groceries, including, occasional like meal out, your kids' activities, because you've set that aside. It can take a while to get to that point. But that's a good place to be, especially like when sometimes people ask about aggressively paying down debt. It's like, well, you want to at least be able to have 1 month's expenses before you start doing that aggressively. I know because I had saved some money up. I was like feeling pretty good about it. And I was like, I've got this car note. My interest rate was only like 0.9%, but I don't want debt. I don't like debt. I'm so great with money, right? So I paid off the car. I had like 2 more years left. Like, I've got the money. I'm paying it off. 3 days later, my husband lost his job. So now, here we are. Like, we could have had that money to kind of coast along without his income, but I've paid off this car now. Once you do that, you can't rein that back. And so thankfully we didn't have to use credit cards, but it's like, well, we could have been in the situation that like if something came up, now we'd have to maybe put something on a card if we couldn't do it from my income. I mean, thankfully we live fairly simply, so we were able to get by for a bit, but still like not having that buffer could have put us into a bad situation. So
Well, that and also sometimes if you like our mortgage company, we could pull our credit report like once a year and kind of go through it and see like where your credit score is, but like it'll give you these little factors. And so one of them always says when you do pay off if you have credit card debt, it'll say you have this open credit card, but you don't have any debt if you have a zero balance. And they're like, well, why do you have that if you're not using it?
right, yeah, because it
And
was based on
so
when they report it, yeah. And,
yeah, so it can have an impact on your credit score, which again is not something most people would know. It's just something that I only know now because I did pay off the credit card debt that I had. And I saw that, my credit score did go up, but I looked at it and I was like, wait, what? You're telling me that it could be even better, but I don't have debt, so you're gonna ding me for
Right.
that?
They like to see it reported and then you pay it when it's due. But if you pay it before it gets reported, like you treat your
Yeah.
credit card like a debit card, then yeah, just like, oh, she's not using this. We don't know if she's responsible or not because it's a zero balance.
Exactly. So there's a lot of nuances. I think that, again, we're not taught this. We don't know unless we have, my parents were simple means. My dad was a shipyard worker and, he had a high school education. I don't think that, well, I know my parents weren't great with money. And so they definitely didn't pass any of those things along to me. And so a lot of it for me has been trial and error, trying to figure it out and learn it on my own so that I, um, don't make those same mistakes, but also now owning a business where I'm looking at how do I make this not necessarily just lucrative, but how do I be successful in that I don't want to carry a lot of overhead and I don't want to have this expense and that expense when it's not necessary at this point in the earlier stages. So I think that that's a really good point. Um, so for YNAB, is that and I think I know the answer, but I want you to answer this. Is
Sure.
that a program where you go in and you like take a course so you get certified?
To be a coach for YNAB is a certification
Mm-hmm.
coach. I mean, course. Yeah. So I
Gotcha.
took that course, and what it allows me to do is to teach people the method, and they gave me like materials that I could use for teaching it. I'm not an employee. I'm not an affiliate. I should have probably thrown that disclaimer at the beginning. So I'm not a representative of YNAB. I'm trained in their method to help people to learn it because it is kind of it's once you get it, it's life changing and it makes perfect sense. But there is a very steep learning curve. When I first
Mm-hmm.
started using it, like I was like trying to figure it out. I was ready like just to throw my phone across the room because I'm like I hate this thing. In fact, I deactivated. I was like this is awful. And then I was like let me try it again. And I started watching like different videos and kind of learning about it. And it took some time, but I kind of mastered it and fell in love with it. So now that they have coaches, people just to help you along there. There's a lot of materials out there as far as how to use the method. Of course, as a coach, I'm always like, hey, let me be your coach, let me teach you the method. But there's a lot of free resources even to learn how to use it. You don't even have to use the software or the app. You can use just the method with pen and paper, or you can create your own spreadsheet. But giving every dollar a job, not spending something unless you have it designated or you know where you can borrow from, and then getting a month ahead. Like, those are the really foundational things that just take a lot of stress away from handling the budget. Whether it's a smaller income that has a little bit, at least a little extra, even if it's like $10 extra that you can make a decision like, oh, I'm going to put this towards something, or a larger budget where you're kind of overhauling things and thinking, what's really my priority? Like, what do I really want my money to be going towards? Do I really want to be spending this much money maintaining this, this gym membership that's, like Equinox, so I'm paying hundreds of dollars a month if I'm not using it to its full extent? Or is this my thing? And yes, I want to spend these hundreds of dollars a month for this membership because I love it and it's valuable, and I don't have to feel guilty even if I don't have a lot of money for something else.
Yeah, and we had a comment until I tried to explain compounding interest. I didn't really understand that having a general understanding of how it works is different from having one or having to explain it to someone. And I
Oh yeah,
agree. Yeah.
absolutely. Yeah, I wouldn't even want
Well,
to have to try to explain it. It's like it just keeps adding up. That's how I would define it. It just adds up. It's
yeah, it
math
just gets
things.
bigger. It just gets bigger. But yeah, I think this was so productive, and I just really thank you for accepting the invitation to be on. And um, Valeria, it's always nice to talk to you. I'm sad we won't see each other in a couple weeks, but I
Yeah,
appreciate you coming on as a guest, and hopefully you can come back and maybe do a different topic next time.
I would love to.
Um, yeah, just any last remarks or anything you want to wrap up with?
No, you can find me on Instagram at MedSLP Mentor. My email is info@valeriagary.com. And I just hope everyone gets out there, get a piece of paper, write out how much money you have, write out your expenses, see how that all adds up, lines up. Give every dollar a job. That's how you can get started. You don't need to read a whole bunch of books on finance. Just take those initial steps. Every little step gets you closer to your financial goals.
All right, just as a reminder, if you've joined us for this live episode and your state license requires live CEUs, be sure to complete all course modules, including the one that says complete course before the end of the day on your speech therapy PD account. And thanks again, Valeria. It's so great to catch up with you.
Yeah, it was a pleasure.